Hello and welcome to the cryptocurrency news channel. We got some good news for Bitcoin, not so great news for the cost of living. So the consumer index CPI is projected to go to inflate to about 5% next year. And I believe it'll be probably around 5% for the next 2 to 3 years to even things out. The CPI has actually been below 2% for like the last decade or so. Inflation generally has been fairly low for the last 10 years. I mean, yes, you hear about like New York and like San Francisco, but if you don't like live in New York, LA, San Francisco, or like one of those super expensive cities, which most America does not, things are actually not that expensive. For instance, um, my rent, like 15 years ago, I paid about $600 in Madison for a studio apartment. And that was much smaller than my current apartment right now, but it was a single person apartment studio, and that was $600. I am paying around $600 right now for a 1,150 square foot apartment that I share with a roommate, but each of us have our own room and bathroom. So it's basically 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, 1,150 square feet with a balcony for 12 like 45 per month, which is about 620 per person. And our rent's actually locked in at it grows 3% each year. So the inflation honestly hasn't been that bad. And honestly, we could probably swap out to a similar location somewhere and a similar apartment for slightly less. And I can actually get a studio that is equal to the one I actually had when I first moved here for about maybe like $800. So essentially, like you're just like 6 to 800. Like you went from $600 to $800, and it's been about 15 years. So the inflation rate honestly has not been that high in like middle America for the most part, which is probably where most people actually live. But it is going to get pretty bad the next 2 or 3 years because they've printed a lot of money. When I say pretty bad, I don't mean like it's going to hyperinflate 50% over the next 6 months, like some of the developing countries. I kind of mean like like 5% a year for the next 2 or 3 years, and then it's probably going to go back down to like 2% once they get things under control. They're probably going to raise the interest rates. There's I guess if they can find a president that actually has the balls to actually raise interest rates, because that actually will lead to some political unpopularity. It absolutely needs to be done, but I don't know who actually will have the political will to do it. Maybe Joe Biden will. Maybe Joe Biden will, because Donald Trump obviously didn't have the will to do it. Maybe Joe Biden will. Maybe his successor will, or maybe the next guy, or maybe Congress will eventually do it. But that will actually lead to somewhat of an economic, like a little bit of an economic hard time when they actually do it. But it is absolutely necessary to control the inflation. But the thing is, like when inflation actually goes up in the United States, assets like Bitcoin and gold go up in price as well because the dollar essentially deflates in value. So BTC and gold will actually be worth more. Is it worth panicking? Is everything going to hyperinflate? No, that 5% per year is not worth like panicking or hyperinflating for. And the USD is obviously going to be there. It's not going to hyperinflate at all. But it is going to, the inflation rate is actually going to be significantly higher than it has been in the last 10, 15 years. Now, has it been higher in the future? Yeah, of course it's been higher in the future. I think like throughout the 80s and like the 70s and 80s, like the inflation rate was actually like 5% yearly at that time. It's just been very low for the last 10, 15 years, unless you like live in, you're trying to buy property in like New York City or San Francisco or something. So that's actually a very, very good piece of news for Bitcoin. It's not like Bitcoin will rise by 5% just because the inflation rate is 5%. Like that has obviously a very, very big impact on Bitcoin as people actually rush in to actually invest their money in an asset that's actually not depreciating in price so much instead of keeping it at the bank. So I do expect a lot of outflow from traditional markets to crypto markets in the next few years as the CPI gets to around 5-6% per year. So that will definitely boost Bitcoin as well once people actually get used to that way of thinking. So that is the news for today. Let me know what you think, like and subscribe, and hit that bell notifications button. Thank you and have a nice day.